Solo Leveling's world building is absolutely insane and is rivaled only by the powerhouses that we have in the series, and given there are hunters in several countries across the planet, you might wonder which hunters are the strongest hunters in each country. Well, in today's Solo Leveling video, we're going to be taking a look at the undisputed strongest hunters in Korea, the home country of our series protagonist Sung Jinwoo, and break down both their powers and their feats as well as everything else you need to know. Given there are powerful hunters in other countries like America and Japan, we will be going over those respective regions in future videos as well, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Starting things off, we're going to be going with the series protagonist Sung Jinwoo. When we first get introduced to him, he's a lowly E-rank hunter down at the very bottom of the totem pole for hunters, but early on he gets blessed with a once-in-a-lifetime life-changing experience when he's chosen by the system after his party's nearly wiped out. The system chooses Jinwoo as its sole player and gives him the insane ability to level up his strength well beyond comprehensible levels. Jinwoo, as a result, is extremely powerful, continuously leveling up as the story progresses. But what about his powers? Well, he's got a few that makes him extremely special and dangerous in combat. By now, you've probably seen that he heals faster than normal humans, recovers faster, and the healing process actually speeds up when he goes to sleep. He's also a walking tank because he's got high durability. A great example being how he was still fighting at full power despite being seriously wounded when he fought against the Arc Attack. He's fast enough that he's moving at speeds that a majority of his opponents would have trouble tracking his speed. A great example being how after he gets betrayed by hunters in his party and has to kill them the first time he kills humans, Jinwoo is moving at speeds too fast for some of the members to track. We see him keeping up with the Frost Monarch's attacks and sending off attacks so fast that the Beast Monarch didn't even realize he'd been hit by the attacks until he lost one of his legs. This is made even crazier when you can realize that he can use Quicksilver to boost his speed by another 30%. So think of it like a supercharger on a Dodge Challenger. That's already a fast car, but it's about to get even faster. Due to his accelerated growth rate, the boost that he gets after every battle is insanely high, which makes him basically Super Saiyan of the solo leveling world, because after every battle he survives, he doesn't just improve and get a little bit stronger, he just jumps up levels after every fight, and he gets rewards for doing so, which is how he becomes the strongest hunter on his entire continent in only a few months of training. He's able to use Shadow Extraction. Shadow Extraction lets him revive a killed beast or a hunter as a shadow soldier and is activated by keywords and doesn't require any mana to use. Due to it having such a large radius in which it can be used, it allows for a massive number of shadows to be extracted at once, which then lets the user raise an army to command, but it has a few of its own weaknesses. For instance, it can't be used on things or people who didn't make their own mana when they're alive. Also, Shadow Extraction is only possible for a certain period of time because mana gradually evaporates. It doesn't actually get used on demons because they have contaminated mana, which brings us to another weakness. It can't be used on anyone or anything that has contaminated mana. It also can't be used on anyone or anything that is stronger than the user, which, given how strong Sung Jinwoo is, there aren't that many people by the end of the series he can't use it on. There's also a limit to how many times you can use Shadow Extraction on a single target. He's also able to use Ruler's Authority. If that sounds important, it's because it is. It's telekinesis on a high level. It's limited only to rulers and humans who rulers have chosen their incredible overpowered abilities to actually wield. Rulers are a race of angelic humanoids in the world of solo leveling, so of course they have this super overpowered ability. This should not be overlooked, because when used at its full power, this skill has the attack potency of a black hole and can be used over a massive radius, and when used, it doesn't consume any mana. However, there are drawbacks to using such an overpowered ability, like for instance, it cannot be used to shift the tide in battle against a stronger opponent, despite it being so overpowered and diverse. So when you use it, it's best suited to use it against a weaker opponent, because against a stronger opponent, one, it's not going to have as much effect as you would have wanted to have, because when Jinwoo uses it, he incapacitates the architect statues in one shot, which is absolutely insane. Shadow Preservation allows Jinwoo to preserve his shadows in storage and monitor them by perceiving their senses. Shadow Exchange lets Jinwoo move across long distances instantaneously by using shadows as portals. Due to the fact that the ability works like a gate, Jinwoo can take people with him using this power, and it doesn't have time limits or mana consumption issues to worry about either. The usage of Shadow Exchange has evolved over time as the story's gone on. So like like when it was first used, he was only able to use it if there's already a shadow soldier wherever you want to go. So if there's no shadow soldier there, he can't actually use it. Another issue that was first experienced is that it worked by swapping places, and he had an insanely long cooldown period before it could be used ever again. However, the moment that he was reborn as a new Shadow Monarch, all those limitations we just went over, essentially they got lifted. Dragon Sphere allows him to shoot off a monopack shout that comes from his soul, which strongly affects anyone who's weaker than him, filling them with immense panic and despair. However, it does come with some weaknesses to it. The first we just went over, it cannot be used on anyone that's stronger than him because they're completely above being affected by it. The next thing is that it applies to anyone who's weaker than him, including his own allies, which means that, yeah, it's going to affect his enemy, but it's also going to affect his party members, which means it's best used when he's fighting by himself. On top of that, he can erase his presence by making himself magically invisible and physically hard to see. You would think someone with this much power would be arrogant, but Jinwoo's actually the opposite to a degree. He's super humble, but he's also someone who has a desire to get stronger. It's why when he gets into a battle setting, he's able to flip the switch and go from super relaxed and humble to being a ruthless killer of his enemies, and at times even talks down to his enemies in battle. While that is a change compared to how he was when he was weaker, where you saw more of his insecurities that came to light as a result of his own weakness, being called the weakest hunter in humanity, at his core, the true aspects of himself are still there. Up next, we have Sunwon, the father of Jinwoo. Like Jinwoo, Sunwon was in possession of insane physical power, easily overpowering most of the people who he fought against in combat, at times leaving them with so much damage it took them several months to recover in full from the damage he did to them. With just a single punch, he was able to send someone flying through several buildings and even do noticeable damage to the Frost Monarch with a single attack. He's able to use Ruler's authority to move things around with telekinesis, and was fast enough that when combined with this agility, he was able to dodge attacks on the Frost Monarch and Raken's attacks at the same time and deflect attacks on the Frost Monarch with no difficulty. It's for these reasons he was considered one of the strongest humans in the world. He possessed a deep love for his family, and like any good family man in possession of such a strong spirit and power, he could turn brutal at the drop of a hat towards anyone who meant them harm, going so far as to beat someone half to death for trying to cross that line with him. In short, he's a lot like Vin Diesel. He gets a family power up. Jokes aside though, he didn't abuse his power that was bestowed upon him, going out of his way to help people who are caught in the crossfire of his battles, and even choosing at times to spare those who could have actually been killed by him. Up next, we have Yoon Soohyun. Roughly a full year before the events of the main story of Solo Leveling takes place, he was one of the brave souls who took part in the third Jeju Island raid, but sadly he ended up losing his life in the process, and his death sent shockwaves through the Korean government, which led to them at the time giving up their plans to retake Jeju Island. With the hunters, his death affected those close to him, with one former hunter giving up their hunting career altogether and instead choosing to spend their days as a history teacher. By the time of the fourth Jeju Island raid, his death was announced as a cautionary tale to persuade some from going to the island for that raid, but the stakes were at an all-time high because inaction would result in the deaths of millions of Korean citizens. Sadly, due to him dying a year before the main story takes place, we don't actually see his skill level in combat, but having the rank of S rank does carry a very important designation in terms of his power, and even in death, his impact was still being felt in a way where we do see it at times through how other characters remember him. Now, up next, we have Chae, the vice guild master of the Hunters Guild and the wife of Sung Jinwoo and the mother of his child. When it comes to her powers, she ranks third in terms of power amongst Korean hunters, falling behind Jinwoo and Gunhee. In the story, we do have a moment where Jinwoo himself believes that her power can rival that of Gunhee, going so far as to believe that she was on the same level as him. Her power and skill were recognized by the Ant King as being the most dangerous of the Korean hunters that he saw. She's a master swordswoman, being shown fighting in a super creative and outside the box way to kill monsters she's engaging with in combat, and we see her not only hold her own with egress during the sparring match, but when she gets serious, she's able to outright take control of the fight and secure victory. However, it's worth noting that her sword skill, despite she herself being S rank, her sword skill is only C rank, but she was skilled enough with her sword to earn the nickname of the Dancer. Another reason she stands out is that she's super sensitive to the smell of mana, which causes her to not particularly enjoy the scent of other hunters and monsters who she encounters, but when she meets Sung Jinwoo, that doesn't apply to him because of his affiliation with the system. Guess you could call it love at first smell. When she's fighting in combat, she can turn her sword into pure light, which greatly enhances her sword cutting power. She's incredibly durable, being able to survive for a long period of time against someone as powerful as the Ant King despite the significant injuries that she received and still continue fighting. When it comes to her speed, she's one of the fastest hunters we have on the list, being fast enough that she easily dodged Egress attacks and easily dodges Beiru's attacks when they were sparring, though she did have the edge in that she was holding back. In the first episode of the anime, you see her speed on display where she's standing in the street with a motorcycle coming at full speed and she's able to see the vehicle coming, disappear from sight, flip into the air, and skillfully retrieve the stolen purse that was taken. When it comes to her raw power, she's shown flat out decapitating the Ant Queen with one swing of her sword. What's really interesting about her is that she does have a big heart when you look at her character closely. We see her at times patrolling the boss lair when her guild is on a raid in order to look out for those on the team and increase their chances of safety. She's acutely perceptive to those who are around her, enough so that she knows right away upon meeting him that something isn't right about Sung Jinwoo. However, for as cool as she is in terms of stats and abilities, particularly with her speed and perception, she can be a bit awkward at times, but lucky for her, Sung Jinwoo doesn't really get turned off by that. Next, we have Gunhee, the chairman of the Korean Hunters Association. Gunhee is another classic example of that anime trope where if you see an old man, you better be on guard because they're probably super powerful, more so than their appearance gives off. Think about Netero from Hunter x Hunter or Master Roshi from Dragon Ball. Gunhee is the second strongest hunter in Korea after Jinwoo, making him one of the strongest hunters, and that's not cap either. With a single headbutt, he was shown shattering large chunks of ice layered together, and with his bare hands, it didn't matter that there was an energy blast coming from the Frost Monarch, my guy just slaps out the way with his bare hands. If we had that meme of Virgin Hunter and Giga Chad Hunter, he'd be the Giga Chad Hunter. When he fought against the Frost Monarch, he was matching the speed of the Frost Monarch briefly, and despite his advanced age, he was able to dodge at point blank range, attacks that even the most agile would have trouble with under most circumstances, let alone at point blank range, which is insane reactionary speed. That's up there with Kirito in Sword Art Online Season 2, cutting down bullets with the photon blade at point blank range. He's got insane durability, being able to withstand getting stabbed through the chest and still being able to stay conscious, dead set on trying to will himself into continued fighting despite the injury, which is made more impressive given his age, and like Jinwoo, he's able to move objects with telekinesis. He's old, he's wise, but he's humble and has little regard for those who have goals that are aimed towards their own selfish desires at the expense of others. He's also extremely dedicated to his work, not being above putting in long hours to get the job done even at the expense of his own health. And as the years have ticked by, that urge to get back out there in battle, it never goes away. Even though he knows himself, his body isn't able to keep up with his own lust for getting back into battle. He's a great example of old in body and young in heart, which is part of the reason why I like the interactions he has with characters such as Jinwoo or characters like Jinchul. Byung-Gyu is the next Korean S-Rank hunter that we're going to cover, and he uses a couple of magics that should grab your attention: buff magic and healing magic. Despite using healing magic, don't be fooled because you might think that he can't fight, but he does carry a mace with him in combat. He's another character who we know participated in the third Jeju Island raid roughly a year before the events of the main series. Both compassionate and super friendly, he isn't one who is particularly fond of violence, yet despite that, he does participate in the Jeju Island raids out of a sense of duty, which is admirable. His primary skills were that of a healer, and his skill level was proficient enough that even the most severe wounds, he was able to heal them almost instantaneously. Though he chooses not to get caught up in combat, he does have combat skill that ranks closer to A rank. Where in A rank you want to put his skills, that's going to be actually up for debate, but he himself places his combat skill at an A rank level. He's also a master of hiding, being able to blend in with his surroundings and hide his magic, but in doing so, he does have a drawback. He can't move when he gets to use the skills, so if someone did have a way to track him, he's screwed. While he's not the first character you think about in combat, he is someone that you do want on your side because as we see in the battle with the Ant Queen that takes place, he's able to heal his teammates back to pristine condition after they're injured. However, unfortunately for him, after the Ant Queen fell in battle and he was attempting to heal his teammates, the Ant King tracked down his position and he met a rather gruesome fate. Dongwook is the next hunter we're going to cover, and he's a guild master of the Fame Guild. Though he is an S rank hunter, in terms of S ranks, he's actually one of the weaker ones by comparison. However, he does have some pretty cool showings in the series, like his ability to double his physical side with gigification and being durable enough to continue fighting and moving after the Ant King rips off his arm. We see his strength is enough that he was able to hold back the Ant Queen when it was attacking, which is what you expect from someone that's a tanker type. Lim Taegyu is the next hunter that we have and is an archer type who is the guild master of the Fiend Guild. As an archer, he obviously likes fighting from a distance, and we see in the story that he instantaneously is able to make magics out of thin air with his hands, and they are powerful enough to easily rip through the solid skin of the Ant Queen. And he's got underrated durability, being able to survive a direct hit by the Ant King, one of the stronger characters we have in the story. While he is an archer type and he does his best work from fighting at a distance, and he isn't the most skilled at close quarters combat, he is still halfway decent in battle where he doesn't have his bow in combat. Choi Jongin is the next hunter we're going to go over, and is a beast when it comes to fire magic. He's crafty and he isn't one to break under pressure, and is shown being pretty perceptive. He's the strongest mage type, being somewhat relative to Baek but inferior to Hae, despite her being his lieutenant. With one spell, it was said this fire magic could destroy an entire building, and in only a matter of moments his fire magic was enough to destroy an entire throng of the ants. His speed is massively underrated, being able to dodge the Statue of God's heat vision, and when he uses his flame prison, he's able to make a large net of flames that can be used to restrain B rank magic beasts, with this net of flames being able to be used both for offensive and defensive purposes. He's able to make spears out of flames and even make the flame dragon that can be used to attack his enemies. Finally, we have Baek, the leader of the White Tiger Guild and a true master of transformation magic. He's super serious but cares for the members of his guild with a giant heart. He's also underrated when it comes to his perception, being one of the first people in the series to realize that Jinwoo had limitless strength and was unnaturally strong. When we see him in a fight, while he was taken down by some of the Japanese S-rank hunters, we did see him fight against Dongwook on a pretty evenly fight without transforming, which is enough to say that had he transformed in the battle, it would have further tipped the fight into his favor because of the buff he would have gotten. Speaking of transformations, he has quite a few interesting things about it. The eyes of the beast allows him to get an accurate measure of the power levels of hunters and monsters in the area with his eyes, but he also has increased ocular perception. When he transforms, we see him with white hair and claws and fangs and significantly increased speed and strength, and he's able to selectively transform parts of his body to fit whatever he needs at the time. While he's not the strongest hunter in Korea, he still has some impressive things and showings, like the underrated durability feat in battle with the Ant King, where he was able to continue moving and stay conscious during that fight. The problem is that when you compare it to someone like Jinwoo, who's continuously growing stronger because of the system, you get left behind pretty quickly, which if you're curious to see how Jinwoo's actually able to use the system to level up, you want to click on this video you see on the screen.